Hey guys, I am so pumped for today's video. We're about to make an intuitive style abstract painting and it's going to be epic. Abstracts are my absolute favorite painting style and I'm going to walk you through my process step by step. But here's the twist. We're going to get creative with household items like bubble wrap, salt, parchment paper, and even wine corks to add some unique textures and depth to our masterpieces. Now let's dive in. Now for the first step, choose a single word that holds personal meaning, then write it down with a Sharpie marker. This word will guide the intention behind your painting. Now for me, this word is surrender, reminding myself that I have the capacity to find peace in situations beyond my control. Now take that Sharpie and let your creativity flow as you doodle, scribble, and move that marker across the canvas. This step is all about releasing creative energy, so enjoy the freedom it brings. The idea is to kickstart your painting on a canvas that's anything but blank. Facing a pristine white canvas can sometimes be daunting, causing us to feel stuck with fear. This step helps break through that barrier. Now you can also grab a pencil for adding more marks on your canvas if you feel like it. I've found that using a pencil gives you a different kind of satisfaction. It's a bit scratchier than a marker. And do not worry how your painting looks in this step because we're going to be basically painting over all these doodles in the following steps. Just simply enjoy making marks all over your canvas. All right, time to step it up a notch. In this next phase, we're focusing on adding bolder marks to our canvas using black paint. Now, the reason we're sticking to black for now is that starting with darker colors adds depth to our painting and sets the stage for layering, which is crucial in abstract art. Plus, it's a great opportunity to practice mark making, giving you the chance to figure out what you like, and then you can incorporate those elements in later steps. Now, before we dive in, let's chat a little bit about what I whipped up before this video. I created a marks cheat sheet, which served as inspiration for laying down those big arches and tick marks I painted. Now, if you're curious, you can find the cheat sheet download link in the description below. All right, now let's talk a little bit about texture. Have you ever wondered how to etch into wet paint to get that nifty scratchy look? It's a really cool technique that adds a unique touch to your piece. Plus the texture comes through with layering, which gives your end piece more character. So basically all you have to do is grab a basic wooden skewer, the same ones you use to make shish kebabs, and you're going to scratch right into the wet paint so the layer below shows through. Now keep in mind it only works with wet paint, so timing is everything. Now next up, let's get creative with bubble wrap. I absolutely love this method. So all you have to do is load up your brush with paint and press it onto the bubble wrap and then transfer that funky honeycomb pattern right onto your canvas. It's a really fun technique that adds texture and also visual interest. And do not worry about perfection or composition just yet. We're still in the experimental phase, so let your creativity flow and see where these mark making takes you. Now I'm switching gears here and I'm grabbing a small round brush to add some smaller delicate marks. Now abstract painting is all about balance, so mixing big bold strokes with finer details creates a visual contrast that keeps things balanced. Now, as for how much black paint you should use, it's totally up to you. Remember, we'll be layering later on, so don't stress about getting everything perfect right now. As a summary for this step, experiment adding big bold strokes with your bigger brush, mixed with smaller, more delicate strokes with a smaller brush, and use household items like bubble wrap and a wooden skewer to create nifty textures. Then once you're satisfied with this step, let your painting air dry or speed up the process with a hair dryer. And don't forget to take a picture of your progress. I'm actually going to ask you to refer back to it in a later step. All right, for the next step, we're going to move on to some gorgeous grays. This step gets us comfy with using more than just one color before we dive into the full rainbow. So before we get started, I whipped up 3 different grays by mixing various amounts of white and black. We've got a dark charcoal gray, a medium gray, and a light gray. And like the last step, do not worry about composition in this step. Just let your creativity flow. Now onto some exciting techniques. Have you ever tried using your non-dominant hand to make marks? I find that it adds a whole new level of looseness and flow into your artwork. And also, fun fact, using your non-dominant hand for art isn't just about making amazing artwork, it's actually good for your brain. I was reading this fascinating study recently that showed how it can actually enhance creativity and even help reduce stress. Another fun technique involves parchment paper. Grab a small square, blob on all three grays, then flip it upside down onto your canvas and use your hand to smooth it over. When you peel it off, you'll be left with a nifty smeared effect. Plus, you can use any leftover paint on other parts of your canvas to avoid waste. It's an easy way to get paint across your canvas. Now let's talk about using household objects as stamping tools. My best advice is to take a peek into your recycling bin. You might just find some hidden treasures like wine corks. They make fantastic stamping tools and add unique patterns to your painting. Just remember though, acrylic paint doesn't wash off easily once dried, so avoid using anything you don't want to get ruined. All right, on to the coolest trick in the book, adding texture with salt. Simply mix some salt into your paint and brush it sparingly for a bumpy effect. I like to apply it with one brush stroke at the bottom of the canvas and in two other small areas. This helps create balance in the painting and ensure that the viewer's eye moves around the canvas. And lastly, let's get creative with some wooden skewers. This time we're going to use them to add some fine lines. I was feeling like adding a grid-like line effect, so I first started adding the lines horizontally, and then I layered vertical lines on top for a very cool effect. Basically, the possibilities are endless in this step, so don't be afraid to experiment and have fun with your tools. After all, art is all about expressing yourself and thinking outside the box. To summarize, for this step, we continued adding marks with 3 different gray paints and experimented with using household items like wine corks and skewers, adding texture with salt, parchment paper transfer method, and simply making marks with our non-dominant hand. Now, when you're happy with the gray layer, you're going to leave it to dry before the next step. While we wait for our painting to dry, let's discuss how to select your color palette. In this tutorial, I've opted for a blue, yellow, and green scheme, but you're welcome to experiment. For instance, I've also tried this painting with lime green, aqua, and fluorescent pink for a livelier look. To simplify, consider choosing 3 colors. One as your primary hue, another one for your main accent color, which we're going to use modestly, and the third is a secondary accent color to add visual interest, which is used very sparingly. For color ideas, just look around your home and see what colors you already got in your decor. It'll feel more personal since those are probably the colors you're already drawn to. All right, now on to the next layer, which focuses on our main overall color. Now I picked blue as my primary hue, but you can choose any color you'd like. On my palette, I prepared ultramarine blue and created 2 additional shades by mixing in white for one and black with the other. This gives me 3 distinct blues to work with: a light blue, a medium blue, and a deep navy blue. This variety helps to add depth to the painting by introducing different values, or in simpler terms, basically adding contrast between the colors. Now remember taking a picture of that black painting step? Now is the time to check it out and see if there's any patterns or marks that catches your eye. I personally like the big arches and honeycomb patterns, so I'm repeating those with my navy paint. Another handy trick for pattern making is using parchment paper to create stencils. I simply folded my paper, cut out oval shapes, and then used them as stencils in various areas of my canvas. It's a great way to incorporate bold, repeating patterns. I personally often find it challenging to remember to include larger patterns in my artwork. Since I sit so close to my canvas, I tend to focus on the smaller marks. It's only when I step back that I realize that I need to add bigger and bolder patterns for balance. So remember to take breaks and step away from your painting occasionally during this step to ensure you have a good variety of marks and colors. I also use Q-tips as another tool for making marks. Dipping them into some dark blue paint, this allows me to create a smaller dot pattern compared to the bubble wrap method. In painting, it's important to provide plenty of variety, from large marks to small brushstrokes to delicate lines, angular shapes to rounded ones. This variety creates contrast, much like contrast between colors. Additionally, we want the viewer's eyes to move around the canvas, so try repeating your patterns in different areas. As a personal technique, I like to work in threes. An important thing to remember is during this layer, we're going to keep some of the patterns we create, but don't worry about composition just yet. That's for the next step when we're going to talk about white space. Also, once you're happy with the step, we're going to let our painting dry to the touch and then move on to the next step, which is adding in our white space. In this step, we're going to add white space on top of our blue layer. Now, sculpting white space in abstract art is kind of like sculptors shaping a masterpiece from marble. Just as the sculptor chips away, the artist strategically creates empty areas to define the artwork's essence. In this painting, the simplest way to start the step is by picking a focal point and ensuring it has ample white space around it, avoiding clutter. For example, I'm going to feature 3 large yellow rings on the right side of the canvas, so I'll begin by creating white space behind where they're going to go. If you already have a large pattern from your blue step you want to use as your focal point, you can start there and build around that. I also make sure to add the white in thin layers so that the layers below have a subtle peekaboo effect. So don't glob on your white paint here, add it in thin layers. Plus I use a tissue paper to soften the edges for a dreamy, soft vibe. I then work intuitively around the painting, taking notice of marks, patterns, and textures that resonate with me. I decide which ones I want showing up in the final painting by carving white space around it. Now, as a bonus, by carving out more white space around these areas, they actually become more prominent and eye-catching. Now, before starting the step, this painting may have felt a little bit chaotic and overwhelming, so this step is all about bringing balance by creating a sense of calm. Think of it like sorting through a busy to-do list to find peace amidst the chaos. One of the biggest fears in this step is overworking the painting and fear of creating too much white space, leading to an unbalanced composition. One way to work through these challenges is to take breaks and to step back and assess your work from a distance. This allows you to evaluate and adjust as needed. Also, keep in mind this painting isn't complete just yet. There's plenty of opportunity to add details as we go along. That's one of the perks of working with acrylics, the flexibility to build upon the work as you progress. At the end of the step, I'm going to show you a before and after so you can see just how much white space I added in my painting, so it helps you guide you through this step. Now, after you're happy with the white space you've added, we're going to wait for this layer to dry and then move on to the next step. Now let's focus on creating the focal point for our abstract painting. As discussed in the previous step, I've decided to make 3 large yellow rings on the right side, the center of attention. To begin, I'm using large round objects to trace these circles, but you can also freehand them for a more organic look. Once traced, I'll grab my small detail brush and some yellow paint. Now I've mixed a little bit of titanium white to make the yellow more opaque without lightening it too much because the nature of yellow is quite translucent to begin with. But we're also going to be adding additional layers to make the yellow really stand out. Now, after completing the first layer on the yellow rings, I'd like to add the same yellow color in a few other spots around the canvas to help guide the viewer's eye around the canvas. However, I keep these additional marks really subtle and smaller to avoid competing with the focal point. Think of the focal point as the main character in a movie and these smaller marks as the supporting cast. I've added 3 little strokes of yellow paint in the center, some medium tick marks, and tiny polka dots in yellow. Also, I've outlined a few blue shapes with a yellow border. These are just some ideas. Now you gotta trust your instinct and go with the marks that feel right to you. Also, don't forget to add a second coat of yellow around the rings to enhance their vibrancy before allowing this layer to completely dry. In this step, we're spicing things up by introducing another color. I've gone with green in my case, but feel free to pick any color you'd like. To whip up this green, I've mixed equal parts of ultramarine blue and cadmium yellow. Then I've lightened it up with some white and deepened it with a touch of black, giving me 3 different shades of green to play with. Adding the secondary accent color is like adding a pinch of spice to a recipe. It's subtle, but it adds depth. In our painting, the green marks should be even more delicate than the yellow ones, blending in but still adding a flavor. So aim for small, delicate marks scattered across the canvas to keep things balanced. I've opted for leafy shapes along with tiny ticks, thin rings, and lines using my skewers. I've also made sure to lightly sprinkle them around the canvas to keep those eyes moving. Now, once you're happy with this layer of green, we're going to wait for it to dry and move on to our final step. Now we've reached our final step. Grab your white paint marker or a small detail brush dipped in thin down white paint. We're going to add those finishing touches in this step. I like to create a variety of details like tiny tick marks, straight and line curved lines, borders, crosses, and polka dots, and even random squiggly lines. When it comes to paint markers, I found a great deal on Amazon. I bought these Fly Max 0.7mm fine point white markers, which work great. They come in a pack of 6 and they cost just 14 bucks Canadian, making them about $2 each, which is the cheapest I could find them for a paint marker. In comparison, Posca paint markers are around $6 each. You can also use a black marker, but I would say go easy since it's bold and can throw things off balance. Remember, acrylic paints are forgiving though, so don't worry about mistakes. You can always paint over them. Also remember to take a moment to step back and assess your painting. Maybe even flip it upside down for a fresh perspective. Enjoy this last step. It's like adding icing to a cupcake after all your hard work. And there you have it. We reached the end of our abstract painting adventure. Before we go, take a peek at the close-up of this piece. You can really see all the textures, details, and marks that make it so special. Remember, abstract art is all about letting your creativity run wild, so don't hold back. I hope you had fun watching and feel ready to dive into your very own abstract painting project. Until next time, sending you lots of peace, love, and color.